Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Sunday, May 18th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside today offers a comfortable high of 68.8 degrees Fahrenheit, dipping down to a cool 57.2 degrees later tonight. Coming up on today's episode, we'll unpack a fascinating legal story looking into what Donald Trump's fight over a law from 1798 could mean for the future of presidential power in the United States. Then, we turn to a serious incident in California as we explore the ideology that authorities believe fueled the attack on a Palm Springs clinic. We'll bring you the details and context on these important developing stories. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. We're tracking a significant power struggle in Washington this morning, a real test of our government's foundations. Ethan, you're following this escalating confrontation between the Trump administration and the U.S. judiciary over the Alien Enemies Act. It sounds like a constitutional showdown in the making.
It truly is, Grace. Sources like Just Security and Perplexity API are reporting this as a major clash over the balance of powers. The Supreme Court has already stepped in, limiting the administration's authority, particularly in immigration. They blocked an attempt to quickly deport certain Venezuelan nationals under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, pushing back against an expansive view of presidential power.
And this Alien Enemies Act, a law from 1798, is now central, especially concerning a Venezuelan gang called Tren de Aragua, or TDA. How do they fit into this legal labyrinth?
They're a critical piece, Grace. Perplexity API notes the administration designated TDA as a foreign terrorist organization, an FTO, in February. Then, this May, they invoked the Alien Enemies Act to deport alleged TDA members. The administration's argument, a novel one, is that TDA acts as a proxy for the hostile Maduro regime in Venezuela, attempting to satisfy the act's hostile nation requirement by linking this non-state group to a government.
That's quite the legal interpretation. What does the Alien Enemies Act actually require, and how does that align with the current U.S. stance towards Venezuela?
The act requires a declared war or any invasion or predatory incursion by any foreign nation or government. As of today, May 18, 2025, the U.S. has not declared war on Venezuela. The administration is leveraging presidential discretion to define TDA's alleged proxy activities as an invasion or incursion, even without an official U.S. determination that the Venezuelan state itself has perpetrated such actions. It's a contentious stance.
So how are the courts reacting to this use of the act and the administration's methods?
The judiciary is certainly pushing back, Grace, primarily on due process grounds. The Supreme Court extended a block on the TDA deportation bid, citing concerns about bypassing due process. And a federal judge ruled this May that while the act can be used, it demands proper notice at least 21 days in a language migrants understand, plus a chance to challenge deportation, far exceeding the administration's proposed 24-hour notice. Just Security also reports that some lower courts are even mulling contempt charges for officials ignoring judicial orders. The courts are not just rubber stamping this.
What are civil liberties groups and legal scholars saying about dusting off this 18th century law for current events?
They have serious reservations. According to Perplexity API, many argue it's a misapplication of the Alien Enemies Act, as Venezuela isn't formally declared hostile. They also contend an FTO designation for a gang doesn't automatically meet the 1798 Act's hostile nation standard, traditionally for wartime. Fundamentally, they highlight due process violations, like the lack of individualized hearings and sufficient evidence linking individuals directly to hostile actions as the Act requires.
With such strong judicial and legal opposition, what's the political fallout from this?
It's definitely stirring the pot. President Trump has criticized the Supreme Court on Truth Social, accusing it of obstructing deportations. In response, Just Security notes some Republican lawmakers have introduced legislation aiming to curtail the court's power to enforce contempt orders. So the battle is extending into the legislative arena.
This sounds like it could escalate significantly. What are legal experts predicting? Is a constitutional crisis a real possibility?
Many experts believe the Supreme Court will stand firm in its constitutional role as a check on executive power. They might slow down emergency appeals, forcing these cases through longer appellate processes that could extend beyond President Trump's current term, which ends in January 2029. This would effectively stall swift policy implementation. And yes, Grace, Perplexity API reports that some experts are using stark terms, warning we could be on the, quote, precipice of a constitutional crisis, given the defiance of court orders and these escalating legal battles.
Indeed, a complex and concerning development with profound implications for the separation of powers. Ethan, thank you for navigating these legal waters for us this morning.
You're welcome, Grace. It's a story that's certainly keeping everyone on their toes.
We turn now to a deeply unsettling story out of California. An explosion at a fertility clinic in Palm Springs on Saturday is now being investigated as an act of terrorism. For more on this, we're joined by our news reporter, Chloe. Chloe, what can you tell us about this disturbing incident?
Grace, this is indeed a very serious situation. According to multiple news outlets, the Federal Bureau of Investigation is leading the inquiry into an explosion that occurred at the American Reproductive Centers, or ARC, fertility clinic. This happened in Palm Springs on Saturday, May 17th, just before 11 o'clock local time, as reported by BBC News. The FBI is treating this as an, quote, intentional act of terrorism, end quote.
An intentional act of terrorism. That's a very strong classification. What do we know about any casualties from this blast?
Tragically, there was one fatality. Authorities, according to reports from CBS 8 and ABC News, believe this deceased individual is actually the person responsible for the attack. In addition to that fatality, 4 other people sustained injuries. As of this morning, May 18th, the FBI has not officially released the identity of the deceased suspect, nor have they provided details on how severe those injuries are or who the injured individuals are, based on information from Perplexity API.
So the suspected attacker is believed to be dead. What more can you tell us about this individual and why the FBI is labeling this as terrorism?
Akil Davis, who is the head of the FBI's Los Angeles field office, confirmed that label of an intentional act of terrorism, as ABC News reported. While a specific motive is still under active investigation, authorities are focusing heavily on online writings posted by the suspect. Both CBS 8 and ABC News have indicated these writings expressed a belief that the world should not be populated. This suggests the attack was targeted and very deliberate. Perplexity API also noted these were, quote, rambling online writings, end quote, which for the average person often implies the content might be disorganized, perhaps extremist in nature, and difficult to follow logically, but clearly alarming.
That's a chilling potential motive. And how was this attack carried out? Do we have any details on the method?
Law enforcement officials believe the individual responsible acted alone, and ABC News reported that authorities are not searching for other suspects. The explosion itself was the primary method, of course. Interestingly, CBS 8 and ABC News also stated the suspect reportedly attempted to record or even stream the attack live. However, the specific platform they tried to use for this hasn't been disclosed by the FBI yet, according to Perplexity API. There was also a piece of information from a Perplexity API summary, citing law enforcement officials, suggesting the explosion, quote, may have involved a car, end quote.
A car bomb, potentially. The damage must have been quite significant then. What's the state of the clinic and the surrounding area?
It sounds like it was, Grace. CBS 8 and ABC News described significant damage to the clinic itself, including a collapsed or caved-in roof and debris scattered widely. Windows were shattered in nearby businesses, and BBC News added that several buildings in the vicinity also sustained damage from the blast.
A fertility clinic is such a specific target. What about the sensitive medical materials, like stored embryos? That must be a huge concern for so many.
That is a critical point, and thankfully, there's some positive news there. ABC News reported that the ACK clinic was actually closed for the weekend at the time of the blast. More importantly, the clinic's sensitive medical areas, including its IVF lab and any stored embryos, were not impacted. BBC News reported the clinic stated its lab was not affected, and CBS 8, along with ABC News, clarified that the IVF lab and stored embryos were located off-site and were completely unharmed. For many families, that news will come as a huge relief, as those labs hold so much hope.
That is indeed a small mercy in this. The experience for anyone nearby must have been terrifying. What are witnesses saying?
The accounts are certainly dramatic. BBC News mentioned reports of a large explosion and significant damage being seen. CBS 8 and ABC News detailed witness descriptions of a, quote, massive explosion, end quote, or a, quote, large boom, end quote. They spoke of shattered glass everywhere, a large plume of smoke rising into the air, and disturbingly, one witness reported seeing what appeared to be a body part.
Just awful. How are local and other officials reacting to this attack on what many would consider a place of hope?
The mayor pro tem of Palm Springs did describe the clinic as, quote, a place of hope, end quote, according to CBS 8. That same outlet, CBS 8, reported that Attorney General Pam Bondi of the Trump administration has condemned the attack.
So, the investigation is clearly very active. What are the next steps for the FBI as they piece this all together?
The FBI's investigation is very much ongoing. They're working to determine the exact circumstances that led to this, the full motive behind the attack, and BBC News noted that part of this investigation includes classifying whether the act constitutes international or domestic terrorism. That distinction is important for legal and resource allocation reasons.
There was a report I saw that seemed a little confusing. Something about a person of interest. Can you clarify that for us?
Yes, that's a good point to clarify. A BBC News article published about 11 hours before this morning mentioned the FBI, quote, has identified a person of interest but is not actively searching for them, end quote. This seemed to contrast with other reports from ABC News and CBS 8, which indicated the sole suspect died in the blast and acted alone. Perplexity API, when asked to reconcile these statements, suggested that the, quote, person of interest, end quote, mentioned by BBC News could indeed refer to the deceased individual. Alternatively, if it refers to someone else, the FBI's decision not to actively search might stem from their assessment that the primary suspect acted alone and there is no ongoing threat from other individuals, or simply that the FBI has not publicly disclosed active investigations into anyone else. As of this morning, the FBI has not issued further public clarification on this specific, quote, person of interest, end quote, detail.
It's a complex situation with many threads still being pulled. Chloe, thank you for that comprehensive update and for making sense of those details for us.
You're welcome, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. The FDA has fully approved Novavax's COVID-19 vaccine, Nuvaxovid, the nation's only traditional protein-based option, but with restrictions for adults 65 and older, or those aged 12 to 64 with high-risk underlying conditions. The FDA, which missed an April 1, 2025, deadline for the decision, reportedly due to political factors, didn't specify reasons for the limits, possibly tied to mandated ongoing studies on serious risks like myocarditis and pericarditis, including research using UK health data, with final reports due by September 2028. Pfizer and Moderna's vaccines remain fully licensed for broader age groups. Meanwhile, polls voted on May 18th in a presidential election shadowed by security concerns from the war in neighboring Ukraine and economic uncertainty. Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski, a liberal, is a frontrunner against conservative historian Karol Nawrocki and hard-right candidate Sławomir Mencen. A runoff on June 1st is likely, as no candidate is expected to win outright in the first round. The Polish president holds veto power and influences key military and foreign policies. In U.S. news, a Trump administration budget proposal could cut federal funding for the Integrated Ocean Observing System, or IOOS. This system, currently funded at $43.5 million, provides vital real-time maritime data essential for navigation, tsunami warnings, and hurricane predictions. The proposed elimination of federal funding has surprised network administrators and users who fear impacts on safety, environmental monitoring, and industries like boating and fishing. A Republican bill in the House, however, suggests increasing IOOS funding. NOAA officials have declined to comment on the potential impacts. Shifting to domestic growth, Princeton, a suburb about 46 miles north of Dallas, Texas, is now the fastest-growing city in the U.S., according to the Census Bureau. Its population surged by nearly 33%, from approximately 28,000 in July 2023 to about 37,000 in July 2024, more than doubling since 2020. This rapid growth, part of a broader trend that saw Fort Worth cross the 1 million population mark and 7 Texas cities rank among the nation's 15 fastest-growing, has led to infrastructure challenges in Princeton, prompting a temporary moratorium on new home construction. And in Vatican City, Pope Leo XIV, the 267th pontiff and the first American pope, was inaugurated on May 18, 2025. His election as Robert Francis Cardinal Prevost had been announced by Cardinal Protodeacon Dominique Mamberti with the traditional habemus papam. The inauguration began with the Pope in the Pope-mobile in St. Peter's Square, followed by a ceremony in St. Peter's Basilica, which included prayers at St. Peter's tomb in the presence of patriarchs of the Eastern Catholic Churches, and the bestowal of the pallium and the ring of the fisherman. In his inaugural address, Pope Leo XIV vowed to work for unity within the Catholic Church, aiming to make it a sign of peace in the world and address issues like the priest shortage in the U.S. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King, with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Pro 2.5 Experimental, Gemini Flash 2.0, Perplexity Sonar Pro, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.